envision three female attorneys coming together to have our voices heard. Each of us would have different opinions, different passions, different backgrounds, and different views. Although we are different and unique, we are able to come together to discuss our experiences, navigating through the legal profession and this thing called life. Now, the vision has come alive, and we invite you each and every week to listen to us as we talk about what's trending in the news and our legal insight, tackle real life issues that affect not only us as attorneys, but us as women of color. Disclaimer: this podcast is intended to provide entertainment and general information. The information provided and the views given are not intended to constitute legal advice and should not be relied upon as legal representation. All views expressed on this podcast are our own and do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever we are affiliated with now or will be affiliated with in the future. Hey guys, we're back for another episode of No Further Questions with your favorite lawyers. This is your girl Brandy, and today's topic we're going to be discussing something that is I'm very passionate about. It's near and dear to my heart. We're going to be discussing domestic violence. This is October is considered Domestic Violence Awareness Month as well as Breast Cancer Awareness Month. This episode we're going to talk about domestic violence. So before we get started, let me introduce my girls. T Hutch.
Hey guys, it's Taria.
Sam.
Hey guys, it's Sam.
And we have two special guests with us to help us discuss this very important topic of domestic violence. We brought back one of our favorite therapists, Kim.
Hey guys, nice to be on the show again today.
And then one of my really good friends and colleagues in the legal industry who is well versed in this area. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hey everybody, my name is Carvana Cloud and I'm the founder and executive director of the Empowered Survivor. Thank you ladies for having me tonight.
Thank you for being on the show. Just tell us a little
thank
bit
you
about
for joining us.
Thank you. What was that, Brandy?
Just tell us a little bit about yourself since you are new to the show, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people have heard of Miss Carvana Cloud. Well, but just
most definitely.
I'm gonna keep coming back on this show because y'all make me feel really good, and so if y'all can just keep inviting me, I will always say yes. I don't know about all that, but my name is Carvana Cloud, and I was the former bureau chief of the Special Victims Bureau of the Harris County District Attorney's Office, and that bureau dealt with prosecuting domestic violence, sexual assault, and trafficking cases. I've been a lawyer for about 15 years, and the majority of my career has been spent as a prosecutor. I also have operated the Cloud Law Firm, which is a general law firm providing legal services and the criminal defense, family law, and immigration areas. In October of last year, I actually left the DA's office to make a bid to be your Harris County District Attorney this past spring. And I tell people all the time, I said, oh my gosh, did you win? Because you would imagine not a lot of people really keep up with politics. So when I say that, people are like, oh, you won. And I'm like, well, let's talk about that. No, just kidding. No, but I tell people that I don't say I lost because I really got an opportunity to meet amazing people. I mean, thousands of people across this county, and domestic violence was one of my platforms. And so people listened, they wanted to hear, and I got to hear from them. Most importantly, about what we needed to do to change how we are responding to survivors and how we're supporting them. So that's just a little bit about me and what I've been doing for the last year or so.
And then you recently just started a nonprofit that assists with domestic violence and sexual assault survivors. So just tell us briefly about that.
Absolutely. Thank you. So the name of our nonprofit is the Empowered Survivor. And the Empowered Survivor is a social services agency, but it is focused on preventing domestic violence and providing services to survivors. But our unique spin is that we really focus on providing those services to survivors of color. We all know that minority women especially are disproportionately impacted by domestic violence. Year after year after year, the Texas Council on Family Violence puts out this report that talks about the number of people killed in Texas. This year, unfortunately, it was 185. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Well, it's a lot. It's too many, right?
You're saying in 2020. So we're talking about 2020.
No, this is 2019. They always do it a year behind.
2019. Okay, but that's still 2019, 1,885.
Yeah, and it increases, Brandy, like 30 to 40 every year. It's crazy.
Wow.
This is like the highest it's ever been, y'all. I mean, this is a huge problem. And so and the majority of those victims are victims of color. And so, but we've seen that time and time again. And so I just wanted to, figure out how we can shift and how we can serve survivors better. And I knew that if we did culturally specific programming and focused on restorative justice on the victim side, partnered with community-based groups, that we could get there. So I have a hypothesis that I am definitely going to prove or work hard at proving. And with the help of folks like Kim and y'all, I know we can all do it together.
Absolutely. And thank you. And that is a great segue to talk about it. So, ladies, again, like I said, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Like I've always said, I am an advocate for domestic survivor and sexual assault survivors. That's my clientele all day, every day. So, but there needs to be awareness. It needs to be brought to people's attention. We no longer need to keep silent. We need to break the cycle. And I want to start out as, because when you hear domestic violence, people think of only one thing. They think either like homicide or, physical. But what really is domestic violence? And either one of y'all could take that.
Kim, you want to take it?
Sure. So when we talk about domestic violence, we talk about literally anything that can impact a person's life in a negative way, where they have a relationship. So an intimate partner, where it's someone who's either married or dating, a family member, someone in close connection, a friend, someone within the house that the person resides in. And so you're talking about any abuse within that close network of that individual. And so it could be physical, it could be financial, it could be emotional. There's so many different things that a person uses in order to gain power and control over another person. And that is usually how we kind of sum up the whole domestic violence and how we characterize domestic violence. And Carvana could add on to that too.
You're muted, Carvana.
I can't wait till COVID is over. Okay. Kim summed it up very well, and she used a term that we use in the space called power and control. Mm-hmm. Abusers, perpetrators, offenders, the accused, however you want to refer to them, they really, enjoy, get off, whatever, on maintaining power and control over their victims. And there's a power and control wheel that exists that talks about.
Real quick. Can we pull up that power and control wheel? It's called the Duluth model. So right before you go in, we're going to have our those that watch us via YouTube, they'll be able to see the power and control wheel, which is the Duluth model. And then once it's put up, then you can just go ahead. So you just go ahead and talk about it, Carvana.
Yeah. So are you wanting me to pull it up, or is they going to?
No, we're going to pull it up. We have they're pulling it up for us.
Because that's just the kind of nerd I have. The nerd I am. I just have it right here. Because
I was going to say, you just have it ready to go. Did anyone mention the wheel?
The power control wheel, the Duluth model.
States Exhibit 1, I guess. I mean, I'm telling you, when people talk about this, here's the thing. People don't often talk about domestic violence, and they don't like to talk about it. It's an ugly subject. It's not a subject that people like to talk about, but every day it's happening, right? I think I saw a statistic the other day. It's like every day 3 women in America are killed as a result of domestic violence.
Wow.
I mean, we need to just sit with these numbers for a minute, because we're not talking about, we're talking about humans, somebody's mom, somebody's daughter, right. They're losing their lives, and we're still kind of doing the same thing that we've always done. But I know we'll talk about that later. But when we talk about power and control, we're talking about ways and strategies that batterer uses to keep the victim in line. So that could look like economic abuse, where they may have all the control of the bank accounts and the finances and all of that. And if that victim or survivor, doesn't comply, then they hold the money, or they tell them, I'm going to take the car from you, or I'm not going to pay your cell phone bill this month. It includes using the children. We as mothers, especially, we are nurturing, very nurturing beings. And when you talk about our children, many times survivors put their children over themselves. I know I've had many clients, and maybe you too, Sam, have, had situations where they may have even been suffering, the women have suffered, or the men have suffered abuse and silence and not reported. But when it came to that child, when their children were in danger, oh, that's when they step up, and that's when they say something. So children, and then you have isolation. Isolation is a big one. Keeping them away from their support system, people who can help them, people who they can reach out to and say, hey, I'm being hurt. So what that looks like is the abuser keeps them at home, or keeps them sometimes in a locked house without a key. They have to stay there till they get home, or doesn't let them go out. You can only go from work and home. And that's really an even bigger issue now during COVID, because we're all isolated by necessity and for safety reasons. But that's also why domestic violence has increased, because they're now more isolated. Big survivors are more isolated in those spaces with their abuser, and they really can't get out and go anywhere. So it's even more difficult. It also includes using coercion and threats. If somebody says, if you don't come home by 6 o'clock, or if you don't have my dinner on that table by the time I come home, I'm going to whip your blah, 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 or I'm going to shoot you, or you can't leave me. If you leave me, nobody else will have you. I'll kill you. I mean, these threats can be veiled. They can be very clear and distinguished. At the end of the day, that's going to scare a person. That's going to scare a human being. And then we also have things like isolation. See, if y'all would have let me pull up my wheel, I would have. But anyway, we'll pull it up. We'll talk about it more. But those are all the strategies the batterers can use. And it's ultimately to maintain authority and power and control. That's why domestic violence is so dangerous, because when those strategies stop working, when they use all of those strategies on that wheel, and they still can't maintain compliance from the victim, that's when it escalates to severe violence and or homicide. So understanding that power and control is really, really helpful if we're really going to work and support survivors in this space.
Thank you for that. So let's transition into domestic violence and regarding professional women, because a lot of times professional women in the workplace, don't tend to report their abuse. I deal with a lot of lower income population, and they sometimes tend to report more, but professional women tend to keep it in because they're trying to keep up appearances for their friends, family, for their network. So it is a common fact that among Black women, we experience domestic violence. We have the highest rate of domestic violence and than any other race. But for both of y'all, why don't Black women, especially professional women, do not report their abuse? Or have y'all seen them not report? Do you get a lot of them come through both of y'all, Kim and Carvana? And why don't they report it?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've noticed is that, especially with minority women, we tend to suppress a lot of the things that happen to us. If there's a hostile work environment or a volatile situation that we're placed in, we tend to suppress that because we don't want to make it seem like we're crying wolf, or we don't want to, speak up and say something. And then now we're being, stigmatized as being, oh, you're now trying to be a victim or something. And so you do have a lot of people who would rather try to endure it, trying to pretend to be the strong woman, or, the woman who's in control, and they put themselves more at risk. I recently heard a situation where there was this woman who worked in a particular environment that was a lot, kind of male dominated, and she didn't feel as though she had an outlet to express hey, I'm being abused, and nobody there knew what was going on. And then one morning, everybody was coming into the office and they called her. She didn't answer the phone. She was, not there. Nobody knew where she was. And come to find out, she decided to take her life because there was no outlet for her, because she felt like, I have to keep this all in. And so, even in this power movement that we as women have, we have to be cognizant that there are a lot of us that are still struggling with a lot of things that we don't feel as comfortable with expressing. But when you have people who are more aware, like Carvana was saying earlier, more aware of the abuse of domestic violence and the different abuses that occur within relationships and even within family, then they're able to have someone to say, hey, you don't have to endure this anymore. Let me get you resources. Let me get you help, which is why the culturally competent organization such as Carvana's is really important, because they may not feel comfortable going somewhere where they don't have someone who looks like them, sounds like them, and able to speak their language as well. So, we talk about why they stay in these situations, because we all have a persona to keep up, And if we're continually keeping up these personas, we're continually masking the pain and suffering and things that we're enduring, and more than likely it's going to become normalized and we're not going to reach out and get help.
Yeah. Yeah, Kim is, she is just so eloquent in how she explains that, and she's so well versed and so trained in this space. I'm just proud to say that I worked with her when we were at the DA's office.
Carvana hired me.
Thank you. They do call me the community plug. I'm just saying. Kim was wonderful, and she brought that actually to me, because when I was growing up in the DA's office as a baby prosecutor, I must say, even as a child survivor, I didn't really appreciate or understand, I think, the connection with the cultural competency piece and the advocacy piece. But she helped me to understand that. And it's something that I'm telling you, it's real. It's a game changer. Y'all, we have to realize Black women, since we stepped foot onto this soil, have had to be the most brave, resilient, creative human beings. We have been marginalized since day one. We've been raped, we've been abused, we've been talked about, we've been mistreated, but we've had to still stand up. We've had to still maintain our status, and we had to, still get through, because we had to support our children, and we had to push our men forward, and all of that. And so that has been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And so we don't just feel comfortable saying that I'm hurt, or can you help me? That's difficult, because we've had to be so brave and strong. Now, that's also why we need to have more outreach. And we need to have more discussions about this. And one of the things I'm super excited about is we all understand that minorities, especially the Black community, is not very comfortable all the time with law enforcement. And so as many people that do report domestic violence to law enforcement, there's just as many, if not more, that don't. And those are the survivors that we are going after with the Empowered Survivor, right? Now, we also have a connection with HPD and law enforcement where they can refer survivors to us for our services, but we're trying to meet those people that are not calling 911, that are not saying anything. And we're doing that by partnering with first ladies in this community. I just had a wonderful meeting with them over the weekend, and we're starting a program that will allow women to feel empowered and to discuss these conversations in a safe space. We're doing it by showing up at, voter registration events where we talk about the various things that we're doing for social justice. We bring it up there. We're at the dollar stores, we're at the hair salons, we're at the Dollar Generals. We go where the people are, and we use data to tell us which side of town we need to start on first, because we follow and that's why right now we're in North Houston, because that's still very much the highest number of domestic violence calls from the police in. So we know if it's high numbers there are probably still high numbers of folks that are not calling. But as far as the professional women as well, to answer your question specifically, we've partnered with corporations. I do quite a bit of corporate training now, and especially in the wake of our horrible racially unjust summer that we had, where so many Black Americans lost their lives due to law enforcement violence, corporations have come out and said, okay, all right, what can we do? And so we work to provide that racial and gender lens, and we talk about the intersectionality that exists there and how it makes minorities more vulnerable to domestic violence. And so we are engaging companies and corporations, private companies who've never done this before, and saying, hey, put us on your HR referral list. Put us on your wellness team. Let us come in and set up at one of your lunches, and so we can just have pamphlets out. Because when we're present, they may not walk up to us and say, yes, I'm a survivor, but they may get back to that office and call our hotline, and that's how we do it. So it's requiring us to do things that are outside of the box and meeting people where they are.
And I just want to touch on real quick, just the professional women component and peeling back that embarrassment piece and how you guys work through confidentiality, but getting them to really open up. Because, I practice family law, and I see a lot of it on the divorce end. So I see a lot of people come in and they want to talk about cruel punishment or violence that may have occurred with them, but they don't want to testify. They just want to let you know what happened so that we could talk about it in the divorce, so that we can ask for certain things, but they really don't want to take the stand because they're afraid that their job may get the transcripts, or this is public record, and this is in the pleading. And you can even go so far as to I mean, we're lawyers. We all kind of know like what's in the pleading. And Kim, you work for the DA, but how do you peel back that piece or allow for them to feel comfortable in a safe space to tell you what's going on without them feeling like you're going to open up the floodgates to everyone knowing their business?
Yeah. One of the things that I was talking to some friends about earlier was I was explaining to them how it's such a powerful, I'm in a powerful space now because I'm an attorney and former prosecutor and an advocate. Mm-hmm. So Chapter 61 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure allows me to be just that, a victim advocate. But when you're an attorney who has done this work like you and I and all of us here, we understand what the law says and they are automatically protected because we're their clients, right? Mm-hmm. So we need to be able to ask questions initially that will establish a level of trust. I don't just go right in, right? Like, right. I may not find out about the strangulation and the rape that's been happening every night over the last 3 years until we're down the road. But initially, I'm setting up, are you safe? Are you secure? Are you stable? What do you need now? And I don't overload them. And I say, okay, that's what we're doing now. Then once we do that, then we'll move to the next phase. So that's how I peel back the layers. I take my time, I build that relationship, and I just do it in phases because that trauma is real, y'all. And it's so much. I don't care how much money you make. It really doesn't matter. The trauma is going to still affect you the same. Right. And it's just going to look different. So a professional woman may be concerned about what they're going to see from her job or her corporation or whatever. But a woman who might not make 6 figures is, thinking about, what might get out if her girls hear about it, or what might get out if somebody sees it and puts it on social media. And, how is she going to be seen by her family or whatever? So I think it's all the same there. But I think you also let them know, look, you're talking to me, our relationship, I'm able to be confidential. I'm not going to share your information, and those things that we do put in the pleadings, let them know about some things that can be restricted from public view. We just have to take more time to educate them about what protective factors that do exist and how we are educated and going to educate them about that. And I think that makes them feel a little better, right? And I also think bringing on folks like Kim, I have advocates in my office. At the end of the day, while I want to be an advocate, Kim knows I'm not. I'm not, because I'm not trained though at like Kim is, right? To be able to understand and how to really support. I'm an advocate because I fight. I'm an advocate because I'm a litigator, right?
Exactly. We're like, what happened? Tell us.
Yeah, we want to fix it. You know what I'm saying? We want to fix it.
We're about to file this, and this.
I think that's a good point to bring up as well, because I know even when in the DA's office and in other and working in community-based advocacy organizations, I do think, and then even being a therapist myself, a lot of it is advocacy looks different from the perspective of the person who's providing. Like you guys, I know the law. You have mastered the law. So you're going to pull out everything in the law that will give this person give this person a perceived justice, right? But me as a therapist, I don't, I don't look at it in terms of the law. Like I learn all kinds of legal stuff all the time talking to you guys. I'm like, what? I'm thinking I should go back and sue some people. But anyways, I think that, when we talk about advocacy, as far as on the therapy side, it's literally walking hand in hand with the person. It's not necessarily fighting for them. It's uniting and building this teamwork and building this team to be able to empower this person to lead me in how to best serve them. So it's literally empowering the person. So that's why it's important for advocacy groups to also work hand in hand with law enforcement, because while we're walking hand in hand and empowering them daily and building those internal skills they need to go on the stand and to speak out and to be brave, you guys are doing the work, to make sure that when it's their opportunity and they're ready to do that they have the opportunity to do that. And so I think it's a beautiful merger of the two. And, Carvana says she's not an advocate, but I've seen her shift gears a lot of times, especially when you have certain women that come in and they just want to be safe. Mm-hmm. They don't want to go on stand. They don't want to prosecute the person. They don't want to do anything. They just want to be safe. And it's important that we have, and I keep saying people of color, but especially in this space that we're all in this country, it takes a load off to walk in and see a person of color. It's just like, man, okay, now I don't have to go through XYZ. Like, I know you feel me. And, or I feel like you understand me. Right. And we can start at a further along pace. The other thing, and I was trying to find this video. I saw it recently and it really upset me, but it was with a woman going into a DA's office to file for a protective order. And I guess they were closing or it was already full, and she started screaming and yelling and, acting out in the hallway, but she wasn't acting out to be disrespectful. She was acting out because she was fearful. She was afraid. She took off, work she's on her lunch break. She has children. This is the only time that she was able to go in. And she's kind of being a little belligerent only because she wants help. Like, she is desperate. And her being so loud, I guess she disrupted the courtroom. And you see, the woman has walked off. The judge running out of the courtroom to come get her, puts his hand on her in a forceful way and guiding her back, puts her in the stands where the jury usually sits, and has her arrested for disrupting his court. And then she's resisting because she's like, no, I was here to get help. I have kids. I have a job to go back to. So she is resisting as they're pulling her, dragging her down the hallway. And they show her in police custody and how they had to restrain her and all these other things. You think about the amount of trauma that woman is placed in, and the bravery that she had to have built up to even go in there in the first place, how all of that was stripped from her. And now we know, statistically, only a small amount of women and men actually get help. This, you see how the justice system has this, this distorted idea of assistance sometimes and help and advocacy sometimes. And, you think about like who saw that video and they really was ready to reach out, and now they're fearful,
right?
How we have re-traumatized this woman, and is she ever going to speak up again? And I don't remember, I wish I could find that video. And once I do, I'll send it to you. Hopefully I can get it to you soon and you can share it. But it was just a really powerful video to show like, man, what are we doing here? There's clearly a lack of understanding of victimization. There's clearly a lack of understanding of how to handle women who have been in domestic violence situation. And there's clearly a lack of understanding of how, what assistance look like and what help looks like to the minority woman.
So let's shift gears real quick and talk about the men, because we've always been talking about women being abused. So men are abused as well. They're maybe not as abused as much as women, but men are also abused as well too. So how, in y'all experience, how frequently are men assaulted? Because I think I saw statistics where like 1 in 9 men are being in a domestic violence relationship with their intimate partner. So who are the common perpetrators with male abuse, and why don't men report their abuse?
I don't have any specific statistics as to how often they are abused, because, and I don't think a lot of us do. There may be some statistics out there, but we don't report that, we don't calculate that, we don't keep records of that. Most of the men who are experiencing domestic violence are suffering in silence, and they've chosen not to say anything, because just as I described, what women have experienced here in this country, it's really, really a challenge for Black men, obviously, because of the historical distrust and the mistreatment that they've experienced at the hands of law enforcement, since, again, we've been here on American soil. And so they certainly don't want to even potentially try to engage with law enforcement. It's scary because it could easily be flipped on them, and then they're back in the backseat of the patrol car, because a Black man cannot be a victim. Oh no, that certainly is not happening here. So it must be something you did, so you're going to jail. You'll sort it out later. But when cops do that, they don't realize that sorted out later, I now have an arrest on my record. I have a charge I've been charged with. And even if it gets dismissed, somebody's going to bring that up, and that's going to affect how I get a job, where I can work, and potentially, in my child custody hearing, Sam, later down the line or whatever, that's always going to be there. And so they just choose not to say anything. And we did a survey over the summer. It was called COVID and the Black Survivor. It was a survey that was co-sponsored by the Texas Council on Family Violence. They went in, they did this project. They helped me do the project, and it was over 306 participants participated in this survey from May to August. We served more people in that time period than some agencies do all year. And it's because we use grassroots strategies and grassroots partners and got out there and did the work, right? And these are people who needed help. Ironically, 15% were men. They were men. We knew, we talk all the time about it happens between men and women, but I did not think that they would show up. But they showed up because we were there. And we were talking about voting, and we were talking about some other stuff, because our agency is based on the 5 social determinants of health. So we talk about things like education, economic stability, social, safe neighborhoods, things like that. So we draw people in by having those conversations, because those are also the factors that make people more vulnerable in underserved communities to all types of violence, not just domestic. And so when we start talking to folks, the men especially, they would say, well, sometimes my old lady puts her hands on me and she fights me, and but I just go to the other room, I don't say nothing, and da da da. So they feel as if their voices need to be muted. So it is happening. It's still not happening at the level of women, but it's happening. And that's why it's even more important, like, women like Dr. Conti Terrell are starting support groups for men who are able to come and receive the services as well. So they don't have to suffer in silence, and they can be made whole again, because they don't deserve to suffer just because they're men. That doesn't make any sense.
And what drives me nuts is, and I see this a lot in family law, where you have a domestic violent issue where the woman has attacked the male, and the police are called, and the police just tell them to leave. Like, they don't make a report, or they do like an incident report, but they're just asked to leave their own home. Like, one of y'all has to go. And so he has to pack up his stuff and leave. But it's like it's no resolve. And I've even seen to the point where some women, they'll be like, call the police, because all they're gonna do is make you leave, or I'm gonna tell them you hit me, or what I've heard like actual recordings where this person has a domestic violent incident occur, and women are actually not afraid because they said that they could just they'll tell the police what happened, and nothing's gonna happen to me. They're not gonna arrest me.
Yeah, I think there was a statistic from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence where it talks about 1 in 25 men are actually injured by an intimate partner. And when you talk about men's statistics, it is not broken down as much as women's statistic stats are. So we don't know if these were, men in, male-male relationships, or if these are male-female relationships. We don't really, and then we even go as far as talk about like the sexual assault and rape aspect. Most men are not going to report rape. I think it's not until recently that there's been audience for hearing, like a 9-year-old who had sex with a 14-year-old back in the day, or, a 16-year-old having sex with a 22-year-old woman. Back in the day, it was like, oh, you're the man. But now they're like, no, like, I didn't know what I was doing. That, they took advantage of me. And so now you hear more men speaking up, but I don't think the statistics are there to really talk about the vast number of men who are actually experiencing this. And you talk about the gender stereotype treatment, so when they do go, like you said, call law enforcement, it's like, toughen up, Yeah. So now they have this secondary trauma that are distressed that they're experiencing. And it's like, well, you're right, I should go toughen up, because that's what men do. They pull themselves up by the bootstraps and they move along. And so, and then you have like certain, some therapists even, or some people in advocacy groups, they don't, a man come in, it's like, well, what do we do with them?
Oh,
exactly. I did find the Texas Council on Family Violence report. They did break it down this year, and there were 31 men killed in domestic violence homicides in 2019. 81% of those homicides occurred at home. 2 of the perpetrators killed themselves as well. So those were same-sex relationships where the other partner took his life as well. The youngest male victim was 17. I think that was a child bystander, and the oldest was 93 years old. The majority out of the 31, 28 were either a husband or a boyfriend, and 3 was an ex-boyfriend. And as usual, the preferred method, unfortunately, for homicides is a gun. So, I mean, that's still very huge. I mean, honestly, when we did this, they've been doing this Honoring Texas Victims report for years, and they just started breaking it down like this with the men, I think last year. But this is a huge jump. So it's very important. Thank y'all so much for having this conversation, including the men, and bringing them up, because it's a real issue.
So then if a friend or a loved one is experiencing domestic violence, or if they're in a domestic violence situation, or if somebody who's listening has a friend or a loved one who is experiencing that, what are the resources? I know, like, there's a domestic violence hotline that they can call, which is 1-800-799-7233. But what are some of the other resources? Like, I know, Carvana, can they reach out to you if somebody is a victim of domestic violence? Kim, can they, in some resources, because we're coming to the end of the show, so I would like to provide those resources. Absolutely. So somebody who's listening can seek help.
Thank you again, Brandy. Please call the Empowered Survivor. Our number is 281-406-3417. Again, that's 281-406-3417. You can find us on Facebook, Empowered Survivor, and I'm on Instagram as Cloud for Texas. I think we have an Instagram account as well, but clearly I don't handle the social media, as you can see. But call us, 281-406-3417. And we have a 24-hour hotline, okay? You don't have to call the national hotline to get help here in Harris County. I don't play that. You get help immediately when you call here. The national hotline is wonderful. It's there for a reason. It's done wonderful work. It continues to do great work. But we need to help our own people in our own community. So call us. We'll be there for you. And again, we do everything from short and long-term housing to helping you do credit restoration and help you get a bank account and buy your own house. We have home buyer classes and everything in the middle, including housing, and providing food and clothing and access to counseling, getting you your GED if you don't have it, helping you pay your babysitter, daycare, bills, all the real things that survivors need. So you do not have to struggle alone. You do not have to suffer in silence. We are here for you.
And Kim, do you have any resources you want to provide for our listeners?
Yeah, well, Carvana listed the best resources out there. And then also just to tell people, if you are fearful to call somebody or alert authorities or someone outside of your space, find somebody that you can connect with and trust within your immediate circle and get help from them, and allow them to walk hand in hand with you until you're strong enough to, or you feel that it's time for you to move on. And because I think so many times we miss, though, like there's always a friend who has their hand outstretched ready to help. And I think that's usually the first, I guess, point of contact for a lot of survivors of domestic violence is someone within their immediate circle. And, and it's very vital that we even teach each other, like peer to peer, like, hey, have you heard of this resource? And just have these things on hand, because you just never know who's going to reach out. There's been some people who I've come in contact with that I would have never, in my mind, even thought of that would be something that they dealt with, but it was, and I wasn't equipped. And so just having these resources on hand can really, be life or death in some situations. But if they are looking for counseling services or anything like that, I am open for virtual counseling during these COVID times. So they can go to www.successfulhealingcenter.com and sign up to do consultations and counseling. And I do offer sliding scales and things like that for those who are not able to afford the services, because my main goal is to make sure that you get the help that you need to be empowered, to be able to live an empowered life. So
also, thank you, Kim, for that. Also, if you're seeking need free legal advice and you are in the lower income population, you can contact Lone Star Legal Aid at 713-652-0077. And you can also apply online at lonestarlegal.blog. But there are resources there. So if anybody who is listening, if you have a friend or a loved one, do not sit in silence. There's resources there. We need to break the cycle.
One thing that I would mention too is if you do not qualify for Lone Star Legal Aid, you can still file a protective order civilly or quasi-criminal. So if the DA won't pick up your protective order, or you're waiting to hear back, you do not have to wait for a DA. I know in Harris County, we have protective order courts that are specifically there to hear protective orders. In every county in Texas, you are able to file a quasi-criminal protective order from the civil side, that you can hire your own attorney and they can pursue that as well. So you don't have to always wait for the DA. If you don't qualify for Lone Star Legal Aid, you can call a private family law attorney or a criminal attorney, and you can file your own protective order to get some protected.
Oh, is that what quasi means? Because us non-legal people,
Thank you.
like, what is quasi?
Nobody knows that word.
Quasi is kind of in between. So it's like a marriage of family law, of civil law, and criminal. So a protective order is a criminal action, but you're not getting someone put in jail. So you may not want that person to necessarily go to jail. You just want that person to stay away from you and you to be safe. And so that way you can get a protective order that necessarily doesn't mean that they'll go to jail, but it does mean that they will have to stay so many feet away from you. They can limit their contact with you if it's granted.
And what's the difference between a protective order and a restraining order? Because I don't know what I should get, because I don't know any of this legal stuff.
Well, a protective order, we call protective orders similar to what most people think is a restraining order in the state of Texas. So a restraining order is more so used in Texas for civil remedies. So if I want if I'm getting a divorce and I don't want anyone to change passwords, or, I don't want anyone to lock me out the house and you can't, those are kind of restraining orders, restraining you temporarily from something. But if you're asking for a protective order, that is what most people think a restraining order is. That is to actually protect you from this individual that is causing you some sort of violence or harm.
That's when you have the 200, 300 feet away. It lasts about 2 years minimum. It can be longer. It can be short if you have a negotiation. But that's
one thing that I will say, if you want a protective order, please make sure you keep the communications. If you can, keep the emails, because for a civil protective order, that burden is still pretty high. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt, but we still have to have a certain amount of evidence. So I know some people, they just make the great escape, and we want you to be safe, but take some things with you so that you can prove your case that this person has committed family violence and is likely to occur again. A lot of times we can prove that family violence was committed, but we can't prove that it's likely to occur again unless we have some sort of evidence.
And then what if I don't have time to go? And what if can I get something emergency, like right now?
You can't. Go ahead, Brandy.
Call 911. Call 911. But emergency, we're going to come back on that one, because that's a whole nother show about emergency protection. But at the end of the day, if you cannot, call 911 first. Call 911 first, and then call these resources second, and find you a safe place to go. Like,
get a safe place first.
Yeah, and then call 911. Yes. But this is the part where we do rest my case. Carvana, this is where, like, you want to lay anything to rest. It doesn't necessarily have to be about domestic violence. You might be tired of what's going on. You're like, oh, I'm tired of hearing this in 2020. This needs to go. So we do a rest my case, and I'm going to let Sam start off with it.
Okay, so my rest my case, it actually has to do with domestic violence, but I do family law, and I represent children sometimes in CPS cases, and I have seen an increase in child abuse. And I understand that typically someone who is being abused, who has children, their children are likely to be abused as well. Please, please, please try to, for the sake of your children, to protect your children. Your children do not have the same ability to resources as you do, meaning they are less likely to call the cops. They're less likely to tell their teachers. And we want to break the cycle. Please try to protect your children. Let's not allow for I've seen a lot of children being killed by abusers, and the abused covering it up or helping drop the body in the creek. Please protect these children. They did not ask to be brought into this world. You can still drop them off at the fire station if you do not want to be a parent, but do not allow for your children to suffer in silence.
Taria, do you have a rest my case?
So as you probably already noticed, this is not my wheelhouse. So I did not speak today. So I'm not going to talk about domestic violence. I'm going to talk about what's about to happen starting tomorrow, October 13th through, I believe, the 30th in Harris County is our early voting. And the big election is November 3rd. This is a huge election. Use your voice at the polls. Go vote. Be educated. Take these next few weeks and learn about not only who you're going to vote for president, but for senators, for judges, anything that's coming up for, what is it called? Where local things that are happening, whether or not they want to put a new road in your city. Just go become educated and use your voice, to vote. All votes will count. They're not trying to suppress our votes for nothing. That means that they are worried, and vote. No matter who you vote for, go vote.
Kim?
Yes. So I know mine is kind of in between, kind of going in line with what we're talking about, but also just relationships in general. One of the things that I have to do a lot is educate, the clients that come in to talk about, toxic relationships, things that they're dealing with inside of relationships. I always have to go back and re-educate them on what a healthy relationship looks like, because many of us don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. And so my case is really just, if you are in a relationship with someone that you're even questioning whether or not this is healthy for me, begin to do research, get out there and read books, discover, what a healthy relationship looks like versus what an unhealthy, toxic relationship looks like. Because early on, if you're able to identify that someone is not someone that you should be in a relationship with, you'll be able to avoid these relationships with these individuals who will eventually become abusive. If they're humiliating you in public, if they're have harsh jokes about you to, make you feel that you have no identity, or make you feel embarrassed or ashamed about who you are, or they're very accusatory. If they have if they're showing signs early on, this is probably a good indication that this is someone that you want to avoid, because we do have to not only, be on the other end of reacting, but we have to be prevent ourselves from this type of treatment and being put in these situations where we're dating people who are abusive.
And if all your friends don't like them, it's probably for a reason.
Yeah.
Carvana?
Yeah. No, thank you. I want to thank you all for having me. I did want to just add a little bit of something about domestic violence toward the end, especially if you're in the Houston area. We have the domestic abuse response team that is led and operated by the Houston Police Department. It was a project we started at the DA's office. It is now citywide. HPD has done a wonderful job with making sure that their officers and social workers respond to domestic violence scenes and deliver trauma-informed care and services. It's not the HPD domestic violence response that you are used to or that you have heard about. Because people like myself and Kim have, made it very clear that we wanted law enforcement to be, handle victims with kid gloves. And we wanted them to be more trauma informed. And I'm very proud to say that they're doing that. And then when you do go through that domestic abuse response team, you do automatically get to work with our agency. And we'd be certainly delighted to be able to pick up where the police left off, because we understand it's a long road to healing. And now I'm going to put on my other hat, my other two hats, which I'm the I am the Voter Protection Director for the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats, and I'm also the Vice President of Texas Democratic Lawyers Association. I'm not here to be partisan, but I'm here to tell you, you got to vote. Terry said it best, tomorrow starts. You can go all the way through the 30th, but we want you to vote and vote early and go all the way down that ballot. Y'all just don't stop at president. Please don't do that. The elections that affect and impact us the most are all the way down at the end of that ballot. So I don't care how long it takes you, go all the way down. Never since the 60s have we seen voter suppression and attempts to make us not have access to that ballot box. Never since the 1960s. We are living in the second part of the civil rights movement, y'all. And we have to make sure that our ancestors, we have to make sure that they are proud of us because we have voted, we have made our voices heard, and they fought so we could be able to go and cast our ballot. So we need to do that, because when we do that, we're making it clear that we're demanding that we have candidates who are going to work for all of us. And that's going to create the social change and reform that we all need to live in a better, safer Texas and America.
Amen.
So
I
So go out and vote.
I rest my case.
my case is absolutely vote. Starting tomorrow, go and vote. And then two, with domestic violence, if your friend or loved one is a victim of domestic violence, don't judge. Listen to them. Listen to what they have to say, because they are trying to reach out. 7 out of 7 times, women don't leave, men don't leave. They always go back. They may keep going back, but still be there for them, because it's usually the 7th time is when they realize that they can finally get free. So don't judge them. Don't disrespect them. Listen to what they have to say. Be there for them. And because they're looking to get out. So that's it. Thank you, ladies. This was a great show. Again, early voting has started in the state of Texas, October 13th through October 30th. The regular election is November 3rd. Let's vote. Let's break the silence of domestic violence, and let's let our voices be heard in voting. And
don't mail you in your ballot. Go walk. Unless you can't, then you mail.
But we got curbside service now. Y'all, we got curbside voting. We got 24/7 voting. There is absolutely no excuse. They've done a great job in Harris County. I'll get you a mask. Call me. I'll get you a mask. We have supply kits so people can be protected when they go to the polls. Like Sam said, there's no excuse.
Make sure you follow, like, and share. Follow us on Twitter at NFQ Pod. Follow us at No Further Questions on Instagram, and on Facebook, No Further Questions. Thank y'all. Thank y'all again for being on the show. It was great.
Bye. Thank you.